My name is Stephanie Mitchell, 38 years old, and until 4 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Daniel and I had been together for 15 years, built a beautiful home in the suburbs of Boston, and crafted what I believed was an unshakable foundation of trust. Then came the late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, and that fateful moment when I glimpsed a text on his phone from someone saved simply as A. The message read, "Can't wait to see you again. Same place tomorrow?" That single text would unravel everything I thought I knew about my husband and one of our closest friends. Before I dive into my story of betrayal and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to follow my journey from devastated wife to the woman who took back her power. Daniel and I met during our sophomore year at Boston University. I was studying marketing while he was pursuing pre-law, and we literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I spilled my latte all over his economics textbook, and instead of being angry, he laughed and asked if I could make it up to him by joining him for dinner. That dinner turned into breakfast the next morning after talking until dawn, and within 3 months, we were inseparable. Our connection was immediate and intense. Daniel was brilliant, ambitious, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in any room. By our senior year, we had mapped out our future together. We graduated in spring, and by fall, at 23 years old, we were exchanging vows in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. The early years weren't easy. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls and a temperamental heating system that left us huddled under blankets most winters. Between my entry-level marketing position and Daniel's law school tuition, money was always tight. I took on freelance projects on weekends while Daniel waited tables at night between classes. Sometimes we would go weeks barely seeing each other, passing like ships in the night, leaving sticky notes of encouragement on the refrigerator. "Those were the years that built our foundation," Daniel used to say. "The struggle is what makes us appreciate everything we achieve later." And struggle we did. I still remember holding Daniel as he cried after failing a critical exam during his second year of law school. He had studied for weeks, barely sleeping, only to miss passing by 2 points. That night, I promised him we would get through it together, and we did. 6 months later, when I was passed over for a promotion I had worked tirelessly for, Daniel took me on a surprise weekend trip to a small bed and breakfast in Vermont, just to remind me that career setbacks didn't define my worth. We had decided early on to delay having children until our careers were established. It was a mutual decision that made sense financially, but as the years passed, I sometimes wondered if we had waited too long. By the time we hit our 30s, we were both so immersed in our professional lives that conversations about starting a family became increasingly theoretical rather than practical. At 33, we finally achieved one of our biggest dreams, purchasing a beautiful colonial house in Newton, one of Boston's most desirable suburbs. With 4 bedrooms, a sprawling backyard, and a gourmet kitchen I had coveted since seeing it on the real estate listing, it was more than we could have imagined owning during those lean early years. The day we got the keys, Daniel carried me across the threshold just like he had on our wedding night, both of us laughing at the tradition but cherishing the moment nonetheless. By this point, Daniel had become a partner at Brewster, Coleman and Associates, specializing in corporate law. His 80-hour work weeks had paid off, and his name was now embossed on the firm's letterhead. Meanwhile, I had worked my way up to marketing director at Pinnacle Brands, managing a team of 15 and overseeing campaigns with 7-figure budgets. We had transformed from the broke college couple to successful professionals with investment portfolios, a vacation timeshare in Florida, and membership at the Oakwood Country Club. Our social circle had evolved with our status. Weekend barbecues with other struggling 20-somethings had been replaced by dinner parties with fellow professionals. Among our closest friends were Jessica and Scott Harris. Scott had been Daniel's roommate freshman year before I came into the picture, and they had maintained their friendship throughout college and beyond. Jessica came into the picture during our last year of university, and the 4 of us quickly became inseparable. They had been at our wedding, and we at theirs 2 years later. Jessica was a pediatrician with her own practice, while Scott had followed a similar path to Daniel's in corporate law, though at a different firm. They lived just 15 minutes from us, making it easy to maintain our tradition of monthly couples dinners that had started back when we could barely afford to split a bottle of cheap wine. Now those dinners featured expensive Bordeaux and gourmet meals in our respective dining rooms, but the friendship remained a constant in our ever-changing lives. It was during one of these dinners, about 6 months ago, that Daniel and I had finally brought up the topic of children again. We were approaching 40, and if we were going to start a family, it needed to happen soon. The conversation had been prompted by Jessica and Scott announcing they were expecting their first child after years of struggling with fertility issues. "Maybe it's time we stopped putting it off," Daniel had said later that night as we got ready for bed. "We've established our careers, we're financially secure. What are we waiting for?" I had agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety about this new chapter. We decided I would finish my current marketing campaign, then stop taking my birth control. The timing seemed perfect, our marriage was solid, our careers were thriving, and we were finally ready to fill those empty bedrooms with the family we had always planned to have. That conversation took place exactly 2 weeks before I saw the text from on Daniel's phone. The changes in Daniel were subtle at first, so subtle that I questioned whether I was imagining things. After 15 years together, you develop an almost preternatural sense for your partner's patterns, which is why the small disruptions felt like earthquakes to me, even as they would have been imperceptible to anyone else. It started with the late nights. Daniel had always worked long hours, it was part of the package when he made partner, but there was a new pattern emerging. These late nights often fell on Thursdays, and unlike before, his texts explaining his delay became increasingly vague. "Working late again. Don't wait up." No details about which case was demanding his attention or which client was being particularly difficult. Just brief, uninformative messages that offered no opportunity for follow-up questions. Then came the weekends. Suddenly, there were Saturday meetings that had never been part of his schedule before. When I asked about this change, Daniel explained that the firm was taking on international clients, requiring flexibility to accommodate different time zones. It made sense logically, but something in his delivery felt rehearsed. Around the same time, Daniel developed an unexpected interest in his appearance. He had always been well-groomed, his position demanded it, but this was different. He joined an exclusive gym downtown, started using expensive skincare products, and bought several new suits that were slightly more fitted than his usual style. When I complimented him on a particularly flattering new shirt, he seemed almost uncomfortable with the attention. "Just thought it was time to update my look a bit," he said dismissively, changing the subject. Our physical relationship changed too. Daniel had always been affectionate, a casual hand on my lower back when passing in the kitchen, a kiss goodbye that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Those small intimacies began to disappear. When we did make love, it felt mechanical, as if he was going through motions rather than being truly present. Afterward, instead of curling against me as he always had, he would often get up to shower immediately or check his phone. The phone, that became the most obvious red flag. Daniel had become intensely protective of his, never leaving it unattended. He changed his password, something he had never done in all our years together, and when I asked about it casually, he cited security concerns at work with confidential client information. He started taking calls in another room or stepping outside onto our deck, his voice too low for me to hear anything beyond a murmur. Then came the business trip that wasn't. Daniel had informed me he needed to go to New York for 2 days to meet with clients. I'd offered to drive him to the airport, but he insisted on taking an Uber. Something made me check our joint credit card statement online the next day, where I found a charge for parking at a hotel garage in downtown Boston, just 30 minutes from our home. Why would he lie about going to New York when he was staying in Boston? When he returned, I casually asked how New York was, and he launched into a detailed story about meetings and dinner with clients at a steakhouse I knew well from my own business trips there. The ease with which he fabricated these details sent a chill through me. This wasn't forgetfulness or confusion, this was deliberate deception. The credit card statements revealed other curiosities, charges at restaurants I'd never heard him mention, a recurring hotel bar tab every other Thursday, and most disturbing, a charge at Tiffany & Company for an amount that suggested something far more substantial than a casual gift. My birthday had passed months ago, our anniversary was still 4 months away, and Christmas was even further. I had received no jewelry from Daniel recently. My best friend Allison Bennett noticed something was off during our monthly lunch. I hadn't mentioned my concerns to anyone, determined not to voice suspicions that still felt too terrible to acknowledge, but Allison had known me since college. "You seem distracted," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Is everything okay with you and Daniel?" Something in her gentle inquiry broke the dam I'd built around my fears. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop, detailing all the small changes and inconsistencies that had been accumulating in my mind. Allison listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finally fell silent, she spoke carefully. "Steph, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but, have you considered that Daniel might be seeing someone else?" Her words hung in the air between us. Of course I had considered it. The thought had been growing like a shadow in the back of my mind, but hearing someone else say it made it suddenly, terrifyingly real. "He wouldn't," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "We've been talking about starting a family." Allison's eyes filled with compassion. "People don't always make sense, honey. Sometimes they destroy the very things they claim to want most." That evening, as I prepared dinner in our kitchen, the conversation with Allison replayed in my mind. Was I being paranoid? Was I manufacturing problems in my marriage because of some subconscious fear of moving forward with having children? Daniel had always been honest to a fault, it was one of the things I loved most about him. The idea that he could maintain an elaborate deception seemed incompatible with the man I had known for 15 years. But then, as I was setting the table, I noticed Daniel's suit jacket draped over one of the dining chairs. Picking it up to hang it properly, a receipt fluttered from the pocket. It was from the Tiffany purchase I had seen on our credit card, a diamond bracelet worth $4,000. The receipt was dated 3 weeks earlier. I stood frozen in our dining room, the paper trembling in my hand, as the sound of Daniel's key turning in the front door announced his arrival home. In that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. The question was no longer whether Daniel was hiding something from me, but what exactly he was hiding, and from whom he was buying diamond bracelets that never made their way to my wrist. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside Daniel, listening to his even breathing, wondering if the peaceful expression on his face was that of a man without conscience or simply without guilt. Had I misinterpreted everything? Was there an innocent explanation for the receipt, the lies, the changes in his behavior? The doubt was excruciating, but the alternative, confirmation of my fears, seemed even worse. By morning, I had made a decision. If there was nothing to find, my investigation would ease my mind and allow me to move forward without these poisonous suspicions. And if there was something, well, I needed to know the truth, however painful it might be. I began methodically, starting with our phone records. Daniel and I had maintained a family plan since our early days together, and I still handled most of the administrative aspects of our household. Logging into our account, I reviewed his call history for the past 3 months. A pattern quickly emerged. Frequent calls to one number, often late in the day or early evening, most notably on Thursdays and occasionally on weekends. The calls ranged from a few minutes to over an hour, and the number wasn't saved in my contacts. The next step was more difficult both technically and ethically. While Daniel showered one morning, I installed a tracking app on his phone that would allow me to see his location. As I completed the download, my hands shook with a combination of dread and disgust at what I was doing. This wasn't who we were, we had never been the kind of couple who spied on each other. Yet here I was, crossing a boundary I had never imagined approaching. For a week, I monitored his movements, comparing them against what he told me about his whereabouts. Most days, the app confirmed he was indeed at his office or at meetings where he claimed to be. But then came Thursday. Daniel texted that he would be working late again, but at 7:30, the tracking app showed him leaving his office building. By 8, he was at Kanto, an upscale Italian restaurant in the Back Bay area, a place we had never visited together. I made a split-second decision. Throwing on a dress and heels, I applied minimal makeup and drove downtown, parking a block away from the restaurant. Through the large front windows, I could see Daniel seated at a corner table. He wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman with long blonde hair. From my vantage point, I could only see her back, but something about her posture, the elegant curve of her neck, struck me as oddly familiar. They were clearly comfortable together. Daniel reached across the table to touch her hand, his face animated in a way I hadn't seen in months when he was with me. They shared a bottle of wine, leaned in close to hear each other over the restaurant's ambient noise, and once, the woman threw her head back in laughter at something Daniel said, her hand resting momentarily on his arm. I wanted to storm in, to create a scene, to demand answers in front of everyone. Instead, I took several photos with my phone and returned to my car, where I sat shaking for nearly 20 minutes before I could drive home safely. The hotel charges now made perfect sense. I checked our credit card statement again and found that every charge at the downtown hotel coincided with Daniel's late nights or business trips. I began documenting everything, the calls, the locations, the credit card charges, creating a timeline of deception that spanned at least 3 months, possibly longer. Then came the physical evidence. While doing laundry, I found a long blonde hair on the collar of one of Daniel's shirts. I had brown hair, cut in a bob that barely reached my shoulders. This hair was at least 10 inches long. I placed it in a small envelope, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. The final piece came unexpectedly. Daniel had left his laptop open on our kitchen island while taking a call in the backyard. I had never gone through his computer before, but the browser was open to his email. As I moved to close it, I noticed a deleted thread had been partially recovered by the system, appearing in his trash folder. The subject line read simply "Today," and it was from an email address I didn't recognize, though the domain matched a local hospital. The recovered message was brief, "Same room as last time. I've taken care of everything. Can't wait to feel you again." Daniel's reply was equally short, counting the minutes. "Bring the red one this time." I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom just in time to empty the contents of my stomach. When I returned, Daniel was back in the kitchen, his laptop now closed. He looked at me with concern. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." The irony of his concern while he was systematically destroying our marriage was almost too much to bear. Still, I wasn't ready for a confrontation, not yet, not without knowing exactly who this woman was and how deep the betrayal went. "Just a stomach bug," I lied, mirroring his own facility with deception. "I'm going to lie down for a bit." That night, I decided it was time to confront him with what I knew. After dinner, as Daniel settled on the couch with a glass of scotch, I sat beside him with my phone in hand. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He looked up, his expression neutral. "Of course. What's going on? Are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air between us. Daniel's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, indignation. "What? Where is this coming from?" "Of course not." His voice rose defensively. I showed him the photos I had taken outside the restaurant. "Then who were you with at Conto last Thursday when you told me you were working late?" Daniel barely glanced at the photos. "That was Amanda Harris. We ran into each other downtown, and she wanted to discuss a surprise party for Scott's birthday. I didn't tell you because it's supposed to be a surprise, and you know how bad you are at keeping secrets from Scott and Jessica." The explanation was so smooth, so immediate, that for a moment I almost believed him. Amanda Harris, Jessica's wife and one of our closest friends. It made perfect sense that they might meet to plan something for Scott. But why the secrecy? Why lie about working late? "And the hotel charges on our credit card?" I pressed. Daniel's expression hardened. "Are you spying on me now, checking the credit card statements and following me around town?" The hotel charges are for client meetings in their conference rooms. Sometimes it's easier to meet there than at the office. And the Tiffany bracelet? The one you bought 3 weeks ago? Now he looked genuinely angry. It was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary. Thanks for ruining that. Our anniversary is in August, Daniel. It's April. I saw it and thought of you. Do I need a special occasion to buy my wife a gift? What's really going on here, Stephanie? Why are you suddenly acting like I'm some kind of criminal? His indignation was so convincing that I began to doubt myself. Was I being paranoid? Had I misinterpreted innocent actions through a lens of suspicion? The hair I found on your shirt? The blonde one? I asked, my voice smaller now. Daniel rolled his eyes. Probably belonged to my assistant or someone at the office. People have hair, Stephanie, and sometimes it gets on other people's clothes. Is that really so suspicious? By the end of the conversation, Daniel had not only denied everything but had turned the situation around so completely that I found myself apologizing to him for my suspicions. He held me as I cried, assuring me that he loved me and only me, that I was being paranoid, that my invasions of his privacy were hurtful but that he forgave me. I went to bed that night feeling confused and ashamed. But as I drifted off to sleep, one detail kept nagging at me: Amanda Harris was a brunette. She had always been a brunette for as long as I had known her. So whose blonde hair had I found on my husband's shirt? The morning after Daniel's denials, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. His explanations had been too perfect, too rehearsed, and the inconsistencies, like the blonde hair when Amanda was a brunette, were too significant to ignore. I no longer trusted my husband, and I needed objective confirmation of what my instincts were screaming. I contacted a private investigator recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. Martin Webb was a former police detective who now specialized in infidelity cases. He was compassionate but direct when we met at a cafe well away from my usual haunts. I need to know for certain, I told him, sliding a folder across the table with all the evidence I had collected. I need to know who she is. Martin reviewed my documentation carefully. You've been thorough, he said finally. Based on what you've shown me, there's definitely cause for concern. I'll need 3 days to confirm. Those 3 days were among the longest of my life. I moved through my routine like a ghost, attending meetings at work, preparing meals, engaging in small talk with Daniel, all while feeling completely detached from my surroundings. The woman I had been just months ago, confidently planning for a baby and believing in my solid marriage, seemed like a stranger now. On the 4th day, Martin called. I have what you asked for. Can you meet today? We met in the same cafe. Martin had a manila envelope that he placed on the table between us. Before I show you these, I want you to be certain you're ready. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. I took a deep breath and nodded. I need the truth. Inside the envelope were a dozen photographs, all crisp and clear, taken with a professional-grade camera with a telephoto lens. The first showed Daniel and a woman entering the Harborview Hotel. Another captured them in the hotel restaurant, Daniel's hand intimately placed on the small of her back. In several, they were kissing in the hotel lobby, in an elevator, outside her car. But it was the final photograph that stopped my heart. It showed the woman's face clearly as she looked up at Daniel with unmistakable affection. It was indeed Amanda Harris, but not as I knew her. Amanda had dyed her hair blonde. My hands began to shake so violently that I nearly dropped the photos. Amanda Harris. My friend. The woman who had sat in my living room countless times, who had hugged me, confided in me, accepted my hospitality and my friendship. The woman married to Daniel's best friend, Scott. Are you all right? Martin asked, his voice seeming to come from very far away. I wasn't all right. I was experiencing a kind of psychological vertigo, the world spinning around me as I tried to reconcile the images before me with everything I had believed about my life. This wasn't just my husband betraying me, this was a couple betraying another couple, a complex web of deception involving people I had trusted implicitly for years. Memories began flooding back, recontextualizing themselves in light of this new information. The way Amanda had complimented Daniel's new suit at our last dinner party. The inside joke they had shared at Scott's birthday celebration last year that no one else seemed to understand. The time Amanda had stopped by unexpectedly when Daniel happened to be working from home, bringing pastries for both of us though she knew my dietary restrictions prevented me from eating them. Had they been laughing at me all this time? Had our entire friend group known? Was I the only one in the dark, the pathetic, oblivious wife? How long? I managed to ask Martin. Based on what I've observed and the hotel records I accessed, at least 6 months. Possibly longer. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of sleeping beside a man who was intimately involved with one of my closest friends. The violation was so complete, so thorough, that I couldn't even cry. I felt hollow, scraped out from the inside. I left the cafe in a daze, driving aimlessly for hours before finding myself parked outside our house, the house Daniel and I had saved for, the house where we had planned to raise children. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown, not far from where Daniel had taken Amanda. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. I called in sick to work, something I had done perhaps twice in my entire career. I ignored Daniel's increasingly concerned texts and calls. I needed this time to process, to grieve, to decide what to do with this knowledge that had shattered my world. On the 4th day, I finally returned home. Daniel was frantic, claiming he had been about to file a missing person report. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been worried sick." I looked at this man I had loved for 15 years, this stranger who had been lying to my face for months, and felt nothing but a cold, clear resolve. "I know about you and Amanda," I said quietly. "I have proof." Daniel's face went through the now familiar stages: shock, denial, anger. But when I showed him the photos, the fight went out of him. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "How could you do this to Scott?" "It just happened," Daniel said, the banality of the excuse making me want to scream. "We never meant to hurt anyone. We tried to stop, but..." "But what?" "But fucking my friend was just too irresistible? But destroying 2 marriages was just too much fun to pass up." Daniel flinched at my language. I rarely swore, but I was past caring about propriety. My entire life had been blown apart by the man sitting before me, the man who had vowed to love and cherish me until death. "Does Scott know?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "No one knows. It's just been between us." The realization hit me then: Scott was in the exact same position I had been in just days ago, living in blissful ignorance while his wife betrayed him with his best friend. And in that moment, something crystallized within me. I wasn't just a victim here. I was also the only person who could ensure Scott wasn't left in the dark any longer. "I want you to move out," I told Daniel. "Tonight. Pack what you need and go to a hotel. Stephanie, please, we need to talk about this. We can work through it. I'll end things with Amanda, I promise." It was a mistake. His pleading disgusted me. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did was a choice. You chose, every day for months, to lie to me and betray me. Now I'm making my choice. Get out of my house. That night, alone in the home we had built together, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Amanda directly, not yet. Scott deserved to know the truth, but a text or phone call seemed cowardly and insufficient for news of this magnitude. No, this revelation demanded something more, personal. As I lay in our bed, a bed I would soon replace because I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping where they might have been together, I began formulating a plan. A plan that would ensure both betrayers faced the consequences of their actions simultaneously, that would give Scott the dignity of learning the truth in a controlled environment rather than being blindsided as I had been. I would host a dinner party. Just the four of us. And I would make sure it was a night none of us would ever forget. The morning after I kicked Daniel out, I called my office and requested a week of personal leave. My boss, hearing the strain in my voice, didn't ask questions. I had accumulated months of unused vacation time over the years. Taking a single week raised no red flags. Alone in my house, I cycled through waves of emotion. Rage so intense it left me breathless. Grief that felt like drowning. Moments of numbness where I moved through rooms touching objects, photos of our wedding, the throw blanket we'd bought on our 10th anniversary trip to Maine, Daniel's coffee mug still sitting in the dishwasher, trying to connect with a life that no longer existed. During one particularly dark moment, I found myself in our walk-in closet, Daniel's suits hanging neatly in a row. I grabbed a pair of scissors from my desk and stood before them, the urge to destroy his things overwhelming. I got as far as pressing the scissors against the sleeve of his favorite Armani before stopping myself. This wasn't me. I wasn't a person who destroyed property in rage, who let emotion override reason. If I started down that path, where would it end? Would I become someone I didn't recognize, someone twisted by bitterness and revenge? I put the scissors away and instead called Dr. Wilson, the therapist I had seen briefly years ago during a period of work-related anxiety. Fortunately, she had an opening that afternoon. "What you're feeling is normal," she assured me after I recounted the situation. "The desire to lash out, to hurt them as they've hurt you, these are natural responses to betrayal. But acting on those impulses rarely provides the closure or satisfaction we imagine." "I want them to face consequences," I admitted. "I want them to feel exposed the way I was exposed." "There's a difference between consequences and revenge," Dr. Wilson said gently. "Consequences flow naturally from actions. Revenge seeks to inflict additional pain beyond those natural consequences." We discussed healthy versus unhealthy responses to infidelity. Dr. Wilson neither encouraged nor discouraged my emerging plan to tell Scott, but she did help me examine my motivations. Ask yourself, are you telling Scott because he has a right to know, or are you telling him to hurt Amanda and Daniel? Both, I admitted. I think Scott deserves the truth. But yes, I also want Amanda to face what she's done. That honesty is important, Dr. Wilson nodded. Just be careful that your actions align with the person you want to be moving forward, not just with the pain you're feeling right now. I left her office with a clearer perspective. I would tell Scott, he deserved that much, but I needed to do it in a way that preserved his dignity and my integrity. The next day, I began researching the legal implications of my situation. I scheduled a consultation with Laura Thompson, a divorce attorney recommended by Allison, who had gone through her own divorce 3 years earlier. Laura was brisk and efficient, walking me through Massachusetts divorce laws with clinical precision. She recommended I gather financial documentation, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, tax returns, before proceeding. In Massachusetts, adultery can be grounds for divorce, but it doesn't necessarily impact property division, she explained. That said, having clear evidence can strengthen your position during negotiations. It often motivates the unfaithful spouse to be more generous to avoid having their infidelity detailed in public court documents. I spent the next day collecting documents, creating password-protected digital copies, and placing originals in a safe deposit box at a bank where Daniel and I didn't have a joint account. I also transferred a portion of our savings, an amount that reflected my personal contributions, to a separate account in my name only. Not enough to be vindictive, but enough to ensure I had resources if Daniel decided to retaliate financially. Throughout this process, Daniel continued to call and text. His messages evolved from defensive, "This isn't entirely my fault," to pleading, "Please give me a chance to explain," to manipulative, "Is this really how you want to end 15 years together?" I responded only once, to inform him I had retained a lawyer and all further communication should go through her. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering irrefutable evidence of the affair. Beyond Martin's photographs, I compiled text messages, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and even screenshots of Amanda's social media posts from days I now knew she had been with Daniel, her captions about business meetings or girls' lunch revealed as the lies they were. I also needed to determine whether Scott was truly in the dark. If he already knew or suspected, my plan would need adjustment. I reached out to him casually, suggesting we grab coffee to discuss a potential referral for his law firm. During our meeting, I carefully steered the conversation toward his marriage, mentioning that Amanda's new blonde hair looked great on her. Scott beamed with pride. That was my suggestion, actually. I showed her a picture of a blonde actress I thought was pretty, and the next day she came home with that color. Told me she wanted to do something special for me. He chuckled. 15 years of marriage and she still surprises me. The irony was almost too painful to bear. Scott was completely oblivious, even proud of the change in appearance his wife had made to please my husband. His love for Amanda was written all over his face, making what I needed to do both more difficult and more necessary. After 5 days of preparation, I was ready. I texted Daniel, "We need to talk about how to move forward. Dinner at the house, Friday at 7. Just us." His reply was immediate. "I'll be there. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain." I then sent a text to both Scott and Amanda, "It's been too long since we had a couple's dinner. This Friday at 7? Nothing fancy, just the 4 of us catching up." Amanda responded first, "Sounds great. We're free. Need me to bring anything?" The casual confidence of her response, the complete absence of guilt or hesitation, reinforced my resolve. She had no idea that I knew. Neither of them suspected that I had discovered their betrayal or that I had planned this gathering specifically to expose them. I spent Friday preparing the house meticulously. I cleaned every surface until it gleamed, arranged fresh flowers in the center of the dining table, and prepared a simple but elegant meal: filet mignon, roasted vegetables, and Daniel's favorite chocolate soufflé for dessert. I selected a bottle of Cabernet from our wine cellar, a vintage we had been saving for a special occasion. In the guest bathroom, I placed an envelope containing copies of the most damning evidence, photographs, hotel receipts, and text message screenshots. I had organized them chronologically, creating a clear narrative of deception that neither Daniel nor Amanda could deny. I dressed carefully in a blue silk dress that Daniel had always loved, applied makeup to conceal the signs of sleepless nights, and styled my hair. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes held a hardness I had never seen before, a determination that bordered on something darker. At precisely 6:30, I lit candles throughout the dining room and living room, creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. Everything was perfect. The stage was set. And as the doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp, I took a deep breath and prepared for the performance of my life. I opened the door to find Scott and Amanda standing on my porch, smiling warmly. Scott held a bottle of wine, and Amanda clutched a small bouquet of flowers, thoughtful guests as always. Amanda's blonde hair was styled in loose waves, her dress new and clearly expensive. I wondered if Daniel had bought it for her, perhaps with the same credit card that paid our mortgage. "Stephanie!" Amanda exclaimed, embracing me with the practiced enthusiasm of a woman who had perfected the art of deception. "It's so good to see you. We've missed you guys." I returned her hug mechanically, noting the floral scent of her perfume, the same one I had detected on Daniel's shirts more than once in recent months. The realization made my stomach turn, but I maintained my composure. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Daniel should be here any minute." Scott handed me the wine. "Bordeaux, your favorite. How have you been? Daniel mentioned you two were thinking about starting a family soon." The casual reference to our personal plans. Plans I had shared with Daniel in what I thought were intimate, private moments, felt like another violation. Had Daniel discussed our marriage with them while carrying on with Amanda? The thought made me dizzy with anger, but I forced a smile. "Things change," I said simply. "Let's have a drink while we wait for Daniel." I led them into the living room, where I had arranged cheese and appetizers on the coffee table. As I poured wine into crystal glasses, a wedding gift from Daniel's parents, the doorbell rang again. That must be him, I said. Help yourselves. I'll be right back. Daniel stood on the porch, a bouquet of roses in hand, my favorite flowers. The gesture that would once have melted my heart now seemed pathetically inadequate, like trying to bandage a severed limb. Stephanie, he began, voice low and urgent. I thought it would just be us tonight. We need to talk privately before. Before what? I interrupted, taking the flowers but not inviting him in. Before you figure out how to spin this? Before you decide which lies to tell me? Please, he whispered, glancing past me into the house. Is someone else here? Scott and Amanda are in the living room, I replied, watching the color drain from his face. I thought it would be nice for the four of us to have dinner together. We are all such close friends, after all. Daniel grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I removed his hand from my arm slowly, deliberately. I'm hosting a dinner party, Daniel. Isn't that what good wives do? Before he could respond, I turned and walked back into the house, leaving him no choice but to follow. The moment Daniel entered the living room and saw Amanda, I watched their eyes meet. A flash of panic passed between them, so brief anyone else might have missed it. But I had been studying their interactions for weeks now, hyper-aware of every glance, every gesture. Daniel! Scott exclaimed, rising to embrace his friend with a hearty slap on the back. Good to see you, man. Feels like it's been ages since we all got together like this. Amanda remained seated, her knuckles white around her wine glass. Hi, Daniel, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Scott, Amanda, Daniel nodded, accepting the glass of wine I handed him. This is unexpected. Is it? I asked innocently. I thought we were overdue for a couple's night. We used to do this all the time, remember? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I let it stretch, watching as Daniel and Amanda avoided looking directly at each other, their discomfort palpable. Dinner's almost ready, I said finally. Why don't we move to the dining room? I had set the table beautifully, our best china, polished silver, crystal glasses catching the candlelight. It looked like a celebration. In a way, it was a commemoration of the end of lies. As we took our seats, I noticed Daniel and Amanda positioning themselves as far apart as possible. Scott, oblivious to the undercurrents in the room, launched into a story about a difficult client at his firm. I served the meal with mechanical precision, barely tasting my own food as I watched the others eat. So, I said during a lull in the conversation, how is everyone? Any news to share? The banality of the question hung in the air. Amanda took a large sip of wine. Daniel studied his plate intently. Actually, Scott said brightly, we do have news. We weren't going to say anything yet, but since we're among friends. He reached for Amanda's hand. The fertility treatments finally worked. Amanda's pregnant. 8 weeks along. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I saw Daniel's fork freeze halfway to his mouth, saw Amanda's forced smile, the panic in her eyes. 8 weeks. Around the time Martin's photographs showed her and Daniel checking into the Harborview Hotel for an overnight stay. Congratulations, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. That's wonderful news. Daniel said nothing, his face ashen. Amanda squeezed Scott's hand, her smile brittle. We're thrilled, she said. It's been such a long journey. Speaking of journeys, I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I've been thinking a lot lately about honesty in relationships. About trust. Don't you think trust is fundamental to any relationship, Scott? Scott nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Amanda and I were just talking about this the other day. In 15 years, we've never kept secrets from each other. That's the foundation of everything. Never? I asked, looking directly at Amanda. Not even small secrets? Amanda shifted in her chair. Everyone has private thoughts, Stephanie. But no real secrets. What about you, Daniel? I turned to my husband. Do you think honesty is important in a marriage? Daniel cleared his throat. Stephanie, maybe we should discuss this another time. Why? I asked, my tone still conversational. Aren't we among friends? Among people we trust? The tension in the room had become unbearable. Scott looked confused, glancing between me and Daniel with growing concern. Is everything okay with you two? He asked. You seem tense. Actually, Scott, I said, standing up, everything is not okay. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I need to get dessert ready. Instead of heading to the kitchen, I walked to the guest bathroom and retrieved the envelope I had placed there earlier. When I returned to the dining room, I didn't sit down. I was going to serve souffle, I said, but I think truth might be a better final course. I placed the envelope in the center of the table. For a moment, no one moved. Then Scott, still oblivious, reached for it. What's this? Evidence, I said simply. Of an affair between my husband and your wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Scott froze, envelope half opened, looking from me to Amanda to Daniel, confusion giving way to dawning horror. What are you talking about? Amanda's voice was high, panicked. Stephanie, this isn't funny. Open it, Scott, I urged quietly. See for yourself. With shaking hands, Scott removed the contents of the envelope. The photographs were on top, crystal clear images of Daniel and Amanda entering the hotel, kissing in the elevator, walking hand in hand through the lobby. What is this? Scott whispered, his voice breaking. Amanda? What is this? Amanda was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Scott, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said calmly. There's more. Hotel receipts. Text messages. Credit card statements. It's been going on for at least 6 months, possibly longer. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair toppling backward. Stephanie, stop. This isn't the way to handle this. How should I handle it, Daniel? I asked, my voice rising for the first time. Should I pretend I don't know? Should I smile and plan dinner parties while my husband sleeps with my friend? Should I be understanding about your affair with a married woman who just announced she's pregnant? Scott's head snapped up at this, his face contorted with pain. Is the baby even mine? Amanda reached for him, sobbing openly now. Of course it's yours, Scott. Please, you have to believe me. Like I believed you were working late all those nights? Scott's voice was barely audible. Like I believed you dyed your hair blonde for me? The room fell silent again, save for Amanda's quiet weeping. Daniel stood rigidly by the table, his face a mask of shame and anger. Scott, I said gently, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I debated whether to tell you, but I knew if our situations were reversed, I would want to know. Scott nodded, gathering the photographs and documents with trembling hands and returning them to the envelope. When he looked up, his eyes were clear despite the pain evident in them. Thank you, Stephanie, he said. For having the courage to tell me. He turned to Daniel, his best friend of 20 years. As for you, I don't even know who you are anymore. He stood and addressed Amanda without looking at her. I'll be staying at my brother's tonight. Don't call me. My lawyer will be in touch. As Scott moved to leave, Daniel stepped forward. Scott, wait. Let me explain. Scott turned, his expression one of pure disgust. Explain what? How you betrayed me. How you slept with my wife while I confided in you about our fertility struggles? There's nothing to explain, Daniel. You're dead to me. Both of you. With that, he walked out, the front door closing behind him with a quiet finality that seemed louder than any slam. The three of us remained in the dining room, the beautiful table setting now a mockery of the destruction that had occurred. Amanda collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. How could you do this? She cried, looking at me with genuine bewilderment. We were friends. The absurdity of her accusation startled a harsh laugh from me. Friends? Friends don't sleep with each other's husbands, Amanda. Friends don't lie to each other's faces for months. Daniel approached me, hands outstretched. Stephanie, this wasn't how I wanted you to find out. I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right time. The right time would have been before you started the affair, I replied coldly. Not months into it, not after I discovered it myself. Amanda gathered her purse, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. I need to go after Scott. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. The photographs do that for you. After Amanda left, Daniel and I stood across from each other in the dining room, 15 years of shared history collapsing into rubble between us. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally, the platitude so inadequate it would have been comical in any other circumstance. But you did hurt me, I replied. You hurt me more deeply than I thought possible. And now you've lost me, you've lost Scott, and you've destroyed 2 marriages. I hope it was worth it. Daniel had no answer for that. He gathered his coat and keys, pausing at the door. What happens now? I looked at him, this man I had once known better than myself, now a stranger to me. Now I rebuild my life without you. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow. After he left, I stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of the evening, half-eaten food, abandoned wine glasses, the envelope now empty on the table. I had imagined this confrontation for days, pictured the satisfaction I would feel at finally exposing their lies. Instead, I felt hollow. The truth had been told, justice of a sort had been served, but the damage was irrevocable. 4 lives altered forever by betrayal and deceit. I blew out the candles one by one, darkness gradually reclaiming the room. In that darkness, I allowed myself to weep, not for Daniel or what we had lost, but for the woman I had been before all of this, the woman who had believed in the power of trust and the sanctity of vows. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, warier, but perhaps ultimately stronger. I had survived the unimaginable. And somehow, I would find a way forward. The morning after the dinner party, I awoke to an empty house that felt both foreign and liberating. For the first time in 15 years, I was truly alone, with no one to consider but myself. The realization was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Daniel had left multiple voicemails overnight, his tone evolving from angry to pleading. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Instead, I called Laura Thompson and informed her that I was ready to file for divorce immediately. Are you certain? She asked. Sometimes after the initial confrontation, couples decide to try counseling. I'm certain, I replied. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and practical matters. Daniel moved out completely, taking only his personal belongings and leaving me the house per my request. I filed for divorce citing adultery, attaching Martin's photographs as evidence. Daniel didn't contest it, perhaps recognizing that a public court battle would only further damage his reputation and career. Telling our families and friends was another kind of pain. I decided to be straightforward without being vindictive, simply stating that Daniel had been unfaithful and we were divorcing. Most were shocked. We had been the perfect couple in their eyes, but supportive. A few suggested I consider forgiveness, that marriages could survive infidelity. I listened politely but remained firm in my decision. What surprised me were the friends who suddenly revealed they had suspected something all along. Comments about seeing Daniel and Amanda looking too close at parties, or noticing how they always seemed to arrive and leave events at the same time. Their belated honesty felt like another betrayal. Why hadn't they said something earlier? Had they all been watching me, pitying the oblivious wife? I withdrew from our social circle almost completely, unable to face the speculation and gossip I knew must be circulating. The only person from our old life I maintained contact with was Scott, who reached out about a month after the confrontation. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, both of us looking like we had aged years and weeks. Scott had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. I imagined I looked similarly worn. "I wanted to thank you," he said after we had exchanged awkward greetings, "for telling me the truth. It would have been easier for you to just confront Daniel privately." "You deserve to know," I replied simply. "I couldn't let you continue living a lie." Scott nodded, staring into his coffee. "Amanda moved out the day after your dinner party. She's staying with her sister in Connecticut." "The baby?" He paused, swallowing hard. "We did a paternity test. It's mine." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "I'm sorry, Scott. About all of it." "Are you?" he asked, not unkindly. "Sorry about the baby, I mean?" The question gave me pause. Was I sorry that this innocent child would be born into such complicated circumstances? Yes. Was I sorry that Daniel wasn't the father? That was more complex. If the child had been Daniel's, it would have been the ultimate betrayal. The family we had discussed having together created instead with another woman. "I'm sorry the child will have a difficult start," I said honestly. "But I'm not sorry it isn't Daniel's. That would have been unbearable." Scott nodded, understanding. "Amanda wants to reconcile. Says the affair is over, that it was a mistake she deeply regrets." "What will you do?" He sighed heavily. "I don't know. There's the baby to consider now. But I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Every time she says she's working late or meeting a friend, I'll wonder." He trailed off, the rest of the sentence unnecessary. We parted with a promise to stay in touch, two people united by a common trauma but unsure if friendship could grow from such painful soil. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life one piece at a time. I sold our house, unable to continue living in spaces filled with memories of Daniel. The real estate market was strong, and the sale provided me with enough money to purchase a smaller but lovely townhouse in a different neighborhood, a place with no history or ghosts. My career became an anchor. I threw myself into work with renewed focus, earning a promotion to vice president of marketing 6 months after the divorce was finalized. The irony wasn't lost on me that professional success had come at the exact time my personal life had imploded. Therapy with Dr. Wilson continued weekly, then bi-weekly as I began to heal. We worked through my anger, my trust issues, my fear of being fooled again. "Betrayal changes us," she said during one particularly difficult session. "The goal isn't to become the person you were before, that's impossible. The goal is to integrate this experience into a new version of yourself, someone who can trust again but with wisdom rather than naivety." Slowly, I began to socialize again, making new friends through work and a book club I joined. I was selective about who I allowed into my life, but I fought against the impulse to isolate completely. Loneliness, Dr. Wilson reminded me, was its own kind of prison. A year after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Daniel and Amanda were still seeing each other, though they had become social pariahs in our former circle. Her divorce from Scott had been finalized shortly after she gave birth to a baby boy. Scott had requested joint custody despite the circumstances, unwilling to abandon his child because of Amanda's betrayal. Scott and I occasionally met for coffee or lunch, our shared experience creating a unique bond between us. We were careful to keep things platonic, both too damaged to consider romance, but there was comfort in being understood without having to explain. He was dating again, tentatively, and encouraged me to do the same. "Not everyone is like them," he said during one of our lunches. "We can't let what they did define how we see everyone else." He was right, of course, but the prospect of opening myself up to potential hurt again seemed insurmountable. Still, as the second year of my new life began, I found myself agreeing to a dinner date with James, a marketing director from a partner company who had been patiently asking me out for months. The date wasn't magical, there were awkward pauses and the normal first date nervousness, but James was kind, attentive, and refreshingly straightforward. When he asked about my divorce, I gave an abbreviated version of the truth. His response was telling. "That's their failure, not yours," he said simply. Their choices reflect on their character, not on your worth. It wasn't a revolutionary statement, but hearing it from someone who had no stake in comforting me made it resonate differently. We went on a second date, then a third. I moved cautiously, transparent about my trust issues. James was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. On the anniversary of the dinner party confrontation, I found myself not dwelling on the pain of that night but reflecting on how far I had come since then. I had survived what had once seemed unsurvivable. I had rebuilt a life that, while different from what I had planned, was authentically mine. The woman who had sat across from Daniel and Amanda that night, coldly presenting evidence of their betrayal, was not the same woman who now stood on the balcony of her new home, watching the sun set over the city. That woman had been fueled by pain and rage, justifiable but consuming. This woman, the one I had become, was fueled by something else, the quiet dignity of having faced the worst and emerged not unscathed, but undiminished. Daniel's betrayal had taken many things from me: my marriage, my home, my sense of security, my belief in happily ever after. But it had not taken my capacity for joy, for growth, for resilience. Those, I had reclaimed for myself, day by painful day. I thought of something Dr. Wilson had said in one of our final sessions: the greatest revenge against those who tried to break you is to live well, not for their benefit, but for your own. I was living well, not in spite of what had happened but because of how I had chosen to respond to it. The pain would always be part of my story, but it was no longer the whole story. It was just one chapter in a book that continued to be written, page by page, choice by choice. As I watched the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon: hope. Not the naive hope of my younger self, who believed love was always enough, but a wiser, more grounded hope that acknowledged both the capacity for human cruelty and the remarkable ability we have to heal from it. I had discovered my husband's affair partner and made sure to introduce her to her own husband. The confrontation had been necessary, even cathartic. But the real victory wasn't in exposing their lies, it was in refusing to let their betrayal define the rest of my life. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild your life afterward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and healing. Remember, you are stronger than any pain that comes your way, and there is always a path forward, even when it seems impossible to see. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey, whatever challenges you may face.